Bitcoin network has. And then there's another field that's a bits field, and then a field that is a nonce, which is very important, in Bitcoin mining. So this value, the Bitcoin miners needs to change this value to generate block hashes to finally to find a solution to a mathematical puzzle, and to get their block accepted. We'll talk about the Bitcoin mining in more detail in a Bitcoin mining video. So we have 6 fields: version, hash rate, block, hash, market root, time, bits, nonce. These are the major fields. Now I'll show you how these fields really look like in the real raw block. So as you can see in this blockchain.info, we have this Bitcoin block. It's nicely represented so that we human being can read it. So to see the raw block behind this nicely represented Bitcoin block, I will just copy this hash value, okay, and blockchain.info actually have nice API, and using one API raw block, then what you need to do is to just paste that the Bitcoin hash block hash ID, and when I press enter, I get this JSON format. This is actually the raw block. Okay, this is the raw block. So as you can see, there are lots of information here. So because this is a big block, meaning that there are lots of transactions inside this block. So there's another website that I like very much, that is blockexplorer.com. Blockexplorer.com is a little bit slow, meaning that it's not yet updated up to this height. So the most recent block height here is 358,999. However, what I'll do is I'll show you a comparatively smaller block. For example, what about the block 8,765? So I just searched that block. As you can see, this block has only one transaction compared to this most recent block, which has more transactions. So that means there are lots of people making Bitcoin transactions nowadays compared to the earlier days of Bitcoin. However, as you can see, we are talking about the 6 major fields in the block header, and those fields are also can be seen here in the blockchain representation. As you can see, the fields bits here, the size here, the version here, nonce here, and blockchain actually makes represents lots of other information, like the timestamp is here, height here, how many transaction fees are here. We haven't talked about transaction fees. We'll talk later about transaction fees when we talk about Bitcoin mining. They also show the estimated transaction volume, output, total. However, all these information all these information are extracted from the raw block file that I have just a few minutes earlier. I made an analogy with HTML file. I'll shortly show you the raw block file, how it should. I actually showed you the JSON file. This is the raw block file, but it's very big. I'll show you a smaller one too, and I will go through line by line what it means. So in the blockexplorer.com, they also have nice human representation, like what's the current hash ID of this block, and what's the previous block hash, and what's the next block hash, time, difficulty. And difficulty is the thing that's that actually determines how difficult it is to mine a Bitcoin, which is actually a function of the filled bits and number of transaction total Bitcoin, the block size, Merkle root nonce. That means again we are getting back again and again these six major fills that Bitcoin block has. Okay. So, as I promised to you that I'll show you a smaller block. So it was a JSON file, Bitcoin block, raw Bitcoin block file. On the other hand, this is also a Bitcoin raw block file, but this is a smaller one where we can see it a little bit easily. So as you can see, we had the filled hash, the hash ID of these Bitcoin block, and the version number, the previous block hash, and the Merkle root, and the timestamp, the bits, nonce, the number of transaction it has. It has only one number of transaction, and the block size is 216. So I close the HTML file, and as you can see, each has this purpose, and the size in bytes. 1 byte equals to 8 bit. Okay, so these information, as you can see, they are extracted. I'm saying again and again, from this raw block file. Okay, and from here, so that means this part is the Bitcoin block header. Okay, and this part is, you can say, Bitcoin block body. Okay, and this body contains the Bitcoin transactions. Okay, Bitcoin transactions. So if so in Bitcoin transaction again is divided into two parts, as we have seen here, that oops. Okay, I open blockchain.info again. As we have seen here, for example, this is a Bitcoin block. So a Bitcoin transaction has two parts. One is the input and another is the output. So it's also can be much more easy to see in Block Explorer, as you can see. So let's open another recent block, for example, 358,992 90s. So as you can see, these are the Bitcoin block headers, and then the Bitcoin transactions start from here. The total number of transactions is 1247. Okay, and total Bitcoin that's been dealt in this Bitcoin block was this. Okay, and as you can see in the transaction, we also have two parts, from to, that means input output and input value output value. Okay, now I already showed you the raw block where we have this header part. Okay, and then we have the transaction part. Okay, so let me open this raw block. Actually, I opened again a big block file. However, we'll just look at only one single transaction, because basically the structure of all the transactions are similar. Okay, so as you can see, we already talked about the block header structure. What are the fields in the block header? Now we are talking about the fields in the block body. That means the transactions. So transactions start with this key in the JSON file tx, and as you can see, firstly it identifies these transactions. So each transaction will also have a hash ID. Okay, if I go back to blockchain.info, as you can see, this Bitcoin block has transactions, and this is the transaction hash ID. So this transaction ID is basically this hash value. Okay, and the transactions also have a version number, and then as you can see here, or here, I'm using both Block Explorer and Bitcoin blockchain.info. As you can see, these transactions have only one input address. Okay, but for example, this transaction has one input address, but that amount of Bitcoin is getting splitted into two separate Bitcoin addresses. Okay, and as you can see, this transaction have one, two, three, four, five different, no, five same Bitcoin addresses. Okay, by five same Bitcoin addresses from different Bitcoin transaction uh, of previous blocks. Okay, on the other hand, here the input have two Bitcoin addresses. Okay, and the Bitcoin is being sent to two other Bitcoin addresses. Okay, so uh, similarly, the same thing you can view here. This is basically the Block Explorer, just a table representation, and here just another nice visual representation in blockchain.info. But as I have said again and again, this information has been extracted from this JSON file. So in the input section, as you can see, for example, this one, for example, this transaction, this is a nice example where we have one, two, three, four input addresses. So this v in size, for example, this one, the v in size, and this is the v out size. Okay, so this transaction actually refers to a simple transaction like this. For example, we have so as you can see, v in size equals to 1. That means the number of input addresses is 1 and number of output addresses is 1. Okay, so as you can see here, the number of input addresses is 1, number of output addresses is also 1. And the lock time refers to something more advanced that we can describe later. Um, so the size of the transaction, and from here it starts the input section. Okay, so from here, so as you can see, this square bracket which ends at the here, this part is actually the input transaction part, and this part, this out, this square bracket starts and the square bracket ends, this part is the output transaction. Okay, so as you can see here, though in here in this table or in blockchain.info, you can clearly just see the Bitcoin address, how much Bitcoin it holds and how much Bitcoin has been sent to this output address.